My mother and I were business owners, and if we don't get bailouts, we didn't feel like anybody else deserved a bailout either. So there was that, and then of course there was Obama got elected in November of 2012 of '08. And then I was a very avid Glenn Beck listener. But who listened to Glenn Beck 15 years ago when he was really funny? He was really funny. He wasn't doom and gloom. It was funny. But he would say things, and over time, he'd say, man, I really don't want to have to say this, but I have to tell you this. And he would throw something out there, and I'm telling you, it would come to pass. And so you're like, okay, I need to start listening to what he's talking about. Well, he started his show on Fox, if you guys remember when he was on Fox News, okay? And at that time, yes, sir?
He was originally on CNN.
Okay, well, that's true. But then he went over to Fox. I remember when he went to Fox because his first thing he had to do was talk about the inauguration of Barack Obama. And that didn't go very well. But what he did was he started hearing from people like you and me that says something's got to be done. We don't know what to do. What do we do? How are we going to make things different? What's happening? And he said he wanted everyone to get together on March 13th. And of course I remember it because that is the day of my birth. That is my birthday. And he wanted people to get together and listen to an idea that he had. And so I watched, and at that time they were using an app called Meetup, and nobody in Tulsa had set anything up for Glenn's show. And I told my husband, I said, if nobody sets up a meetup for this program, I have to do it. And he said, okay. He probably wishes he'd never said okay. But we were newly married, and so my mother and I owned a clothing store called Deja Vu, which is a resale shop that was at 71st and Lewis. And we, when nobody came forth by March 7th, we had cable installed in the shop. We bought a big screen TV. We rented a number of chairs, and we invited people into the shop to watch the program. I was like, what is going on? And so they came in. There was about 60 people that showed up. And that was when Glenn introduced the idea of the 9/12 Project. And of course, 9/12 being the day following 9/11, the most horrific attack on America, when we were united as Americans, not divided by our religion or our color or, our political affiliation. We were united. And he wanted to bring us back, and he wanted us to remember that America's good. And that we're the ones that we're the bosses, not the government. And so we had this meeting in our shop, and it was all done, and then I had 60 people that kind of went, what do we do next? And I went, I guess we have a meeting. I don't know, we have a meeting. And so we started having regular monthly meetings over the years, and I know there's going to be a few people that talk about some of the things that we've done, but we've accomplished a lot. We've learned a lot. I knew absolutely nothing. I mean, nothing. I grew up with all the rest of you in all of this. And so the knowledge I have is what, I've learned through experience over the past 15 years. But I was just reminded of something that we did because Obama gave us so much, to have fun with. And if you know me, I like having fun. I like making fun and poking fun. And I don't remember what it was. It was probably a debt ceiling increase or something. I need a water real quick. It's my Marco Rubio moment. This one's mine right here. We decided we were going to have a death of liberty. And one of our members had a casket. And so we decided we were going to write letters to send no, they did. They had a casket. And we were going to write letters and send them to DC But we were also going to have a funeral. Remember the funeral? So my husband had a trailer. We propped this casket up in the trailer. I go and buy a mannequin bust, paint it green, put a little thing over it, and one of the little Liberty, hats on it, and we put it in the casket. And we decorated our cars. My husband and another man drove motorcycles at the beginning of the procession. We drove through Tulsa. And people would pull over and salute or put their hand over their heart or whatever, because we always had flags, always had flags. And then we ended up with a barbecue. But we have done so much over the past 15 years, and I like having fun like that. I think it's fun. It was, everybody had a good time. But we've gone to D.C. together. We've gone to Arkansas to see, who did we go see over there? Who was it? Heritage, with Heritage Action. We've done things with Freedom Works. We've been a very active group and organization, and I'm going to tell you that we wouldn't be successful if it wasn't for the people that are involved and that take and have passion for their country and for our state. And I think it's when Congress, the Senate, passed Obamacare, and if you guys will remember, it was passed on Christmas Eve out of the Senate. Remember, they kept the senators in D.C., and there was a big snowstorm. And I can remember my mom walking into the house, and she said, and after it passed, and she was just heartbroken, and she says, "What do we do now?" And I said, "We focus on our state, because it's obvious we can't fix the federal government, but we can start working in our state." And we've taken that to even its more basic core into the fact that we've got to work on our school boards and our city councils. Because if we take care of our yard, our own backyard, the rest of it's going to start taking care of itself. But it's kind of hard for us to fix D.C. when Tulsa's broken. So till we get Tulsa fixed, we need to work. We need to stay focused on what we're doing. But I know there are a number of people that had things that they wanted to say. I think Scott McKeechin is one of them. Did you have something you wanted to say? Scott's been very active since, I don't even remember when you came in. Did you come in at the very beginning? Okay, well, come on up here, Scott, and let's talk about 912. They're handing out cake. Feel free to get some water. We still have coffee left. Okay, well, you can go after Scott.
So all of these stories involve my father, and I should also ask if Debbie can come up here.
You're gonna talk
Oh, that's right. This is not a microphone for anything but the camera. So the reason I interrupted Rhonda about CNN was that my father, the World War II veteran, the lead flight bombardier on Martin B-26s in World War II, asked me one time if I was watching Glenn Beck on CNN every afternoon. I said, "Who's Glenn Beck?" He said, "You don't know who Glenn Beck is?" I went, I'll tune in. And that's the point at which I became a Glenn Beck watcher. Now again, Dad was an avid golfer until he had a stroke, and then he was an avid Golf Channel watcher. And so I thought, well, I will get this EasyTel account at the office, and I'll have cable TV at the office, and I'll watch Golf Channel every afternoon, so then I can talk to him about it. And I just happened, Providence made it such that I saw Rick Santelli's original rant about, do you want people to pay for your mortgage? Do you want people to have to pay for your car? And so the first Tea Party event in Tulsa was in about February of 2009, and I was out running around, and I thought, if I go to this thing, Debbie will think I'm crazy. So I go home. By April 15th, 2009, we have an event that's kind of a multi-organization event between the county courthouse and the library. A couple of important things, and Debbie is like, we are going downtown. You're coming with me. There's going to be a national radio guy, John Gibson, as I recall. It was a big deal, and that's the first time we ever met Rhonda. It took me years to get Vilmont Smith in the right order. It took decades to learn how to spell Vilmont. But Debbie dragged me down there, and that's story one. So that's as far back. We don't go back to March, but we do start in April. Now the serious one. And all these serious stories involve the actions of the Obama administration. If you remember, we had a government shutdown. And the first thing they did was they punished the American people. They closed all the national monuments, all the national parks. One of the silliest things, and again, we laughed at tyranny before we understood they were serious about tyranny. They put police tape around the World War II memorial in Washington, D.C. And I saw a picture of that. And I said to Debbie, I said, we are going to go to Washington, D.C. And I'm going to have my picture taken on the inside of that police tape. I don't care what happens. Dad flew over Germany 43 times. I can at least go to Washington, D.C. on Southwest Airlines and be on the other side of that police tape. Now, by the time we got there, the police tape was on the ground. They had these hokey little signs that said, open only for First Amendment activities. And I said, fine. Now, I didn't try and find the picture. But that was important because Ron and Tim, we were at one of these meetings and they said, we're going to Washington, D.C. Is anybody else going? I said, yes. And Rhonda looked at mild-mannered me and went, McKeachin? Not my first thought for somebody who's going to storm the Bastille, but okay. And we went, and we did it. That's right. And we did it, and we continue to do it. And Rhonda, thank you for all that you have done and all that you will do in the future. Thank you.
Yeah, Scott and I we can get into some trouble. I ran for office. Many of you probably don't realize that. In 2012, I ran for state senate. And Scott and Debbie were two of my biggest supporters, and would get out and we'd knock doors, and it was a lot of fun. We've had a lot of fun over the time. So Peggy, you want to come on up and say something? And you have to come up and say it.
Well, I could probably tell you guys 1,000 stories, but I'm not going to do that today. But I will tell you one. In March of 2010, Obamacare had passed the Senate, but it hadn't passed the House. And so it was coming up in the House for the final vote. And Rhonda calls me and she said, they're going to vote for Obamacare this weekend. What should we do? Well, I think we should go to Washington, D.C. So my husband, who was not retired, he was still working at that time, I turned to him and I said, we have to drive to Washington, D.C. And there were, about 12 of us, 16? Yeah, 12 or 16 of us that decided to go.
I got on the radio and asked for people. We had people that came with us that we had never met before. Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so my husband calls his boss and says, okay, I have to be off for the next, I think we left on a Thursday, if I remember. Anyway, he said, my wacky wife, I have to drive her to Washington, D.C. because she has to protest Obamacare. So I'm not going to be in for the next few days. So we literally got into cars. We had 3 or 4 cars, and we drove 22 hours straight into Washington, D.C. And we got there, and luckily we had a lady in the group whose daughter lived locally, and she got us a cheap hotel in Fairfax, yeah. and we hit Washington D.C. like 8:00 in the morning. We went in and we slept for a couple of hours. Then we got up and we took the train into D.C. and we stood on the grounds of the Capitol for 3 days. We stood there and we yelled and yelled and yelled and yelled. Met a lot of interesting people. We met police dogs. Kill the bill, kill the bill. And then
How about
Nancy, come out and play Nancy. And Nancy Pelosi and the crazy woman from Houston, she's still there. Sheila Jackson Lee. They would come out on the lower rotunda of the Capitol and taunt us. And taunt us. And then the last day, I remember Pelosi sent her legislative staff out through the crowd trying to pick a fight. Okay? And we were warned to be on the guard for provocateurs. Oh, yes, we were warned. So that didn't work. So later in the afternoon, she comes out with a gavel the size of a truck and waving this gavel with her little trail of legislative assistants behind her, trying to provoke the crowd to hit her or to do something to her. And we would just sit there and go, Nancy, you came out to play, Nancy, you know. But for 3 solid days, we stood there. My legs have never hurt so much. I know. And then my husband goes, well, you know, I do have to go back to work at some time. So we left Sunday after. We got there, I think, Friday morning, and we stood Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And about 7 o'clock on Sunday, we decided we'd better head home because some of us had to work. And just about the time we cleared Washington, D.C., they passed it. But one of the most interesting things is, I guess it was Saturday night, there were so many of us protesting this bill that we actually ringed the Capitol. And we were so loud that they couldn't conduct business. You could hear the voices echoing through the Capitol. It was the eeriest thing I've ever heard. But we were so loud and we were surrounding the Capitol that the Pelosi crowd just gave up and went home because they couldn't hear each other talk. So that's my story.
So, you know, I remember on the, I got a call when we were driving back, and I got a call from Ron Cross, who used to do our videos and photos and stuff. And he said, they passed it, Rhonda, and, you know, and I cried. And he said, and I got a very beautiful email, and it's the one thing that if I can tell you that whenever I get discouraged, I remember the words of Ron. And he said, Rhonda, he said, did you know that George Washington lost every battle that he fought until he fought that battle in Trenton? I think it was Trenton, right? Yeah. And he said, and he said, you can't give up. You've got to keep going. You just have to keep going, because that's very discouraging when you're there and you're putting your heart and soul into something, and then they did it anyway. But we fought it just as hard here in Oklahoma. If you guys will remember, I told you I like funny. If you'll remember, we were opposing the $54 million that Governor Fallin was going to accept, which would have tied us directly to Obamacare. We lobbied against that. We were up at the Capitol. But the governor was speaking at the country club, at the Tulsa Country Club, and we were out protesting and said, send the $54 million back. And so a news person asked the governor, they said, Governor Fallin, the protesters outside are saying that this is tied to Obamacare. And she said, those people are just misinformed. Well, we had a county convention coming up, and I figured that if I was misinformed, that came with a sash and a tiara. And so that's what I wore to the convention that year. I wore more than just the sash. I'll just throw that out there. But it was a sash and it said misinformed and a tiara, and I got to explain to people.
Did you wear that to the state convention too? I kind of remember you wearing it to the state.
I just remember the county convention. What you got, Larry? Come on. Oh, I thought maybe you had a story you wanted to tell.
I have something.
Well, come here.
Okay. So, this is on a much more positive note, and something that just happened. Shared with you about HJR 1034. I was at the Capitol lobbying the other day on behalf of us all on that. I walk into into one of the offices, Dusty Deaver's office, and meet a young man who I met in Hennessy, Oklahoma, when I was out speaking to an OK2A group. He was running for office out western Oklahoma. He had already read the letter that went out from this club about the legislation, and had already read it on the same day that it had been out. And I met him before noon. We were talking about it, and he'd read it before work. So the reach of this club is incredible. When I got here, we had, can't think of his name. He was county commissioner, John, what's his name? Smoligo. Rhonda says to him one day, "You should come to our club and speak." He says, "I can't be seen at your club." And probably, but the point is that from humble beginnings to now reaching across the entire state, that's what has happened with this club. The reach and the education has been incredible, and so I just had to share that because it literally just happened to me Monday, and we should be thankful that for all the work, because we have 3,000 people or something like that on our email list, and they are spread all around. There are people we don't even know about.
Yeah. So we've done a lot over the years. We've always been in the battle as far as against Common Core. We're always going to fight higher taxes. We're always going to fight for the little person, for the entrepreneur. We're gonna do what we think is right and what we think is and what we know is constitutional, because that's David's job. He keeps us right constitutionally. But I just want to say thank you to everybody, and I want you to know that since 2021, when I took office as the county chairman for the party, I have not been able to dedicate as much time as I would like to Tulsa 912. But I can promise you that once my term is up, I'm back, and we're gonna be kicking tail again, and we're still kicking tail, because the things that you guys are doing when you send emails and when you build relationships with your elected officials, it's going a long way to make a difference. We are making a difference. I know it's hard to see, but I use this. Do you guys remember when we helped get Bridenstine into office? Okay, do you remember Bridenstine when he stood that first day in Congress, and he stood and he swore to people he would not vote for John Boehner. And of course, he didn't realize he had to come up with a name at the time, so he hollered out Eric Cantor when he stood up, and I cried, because I know what they put him through for him to take that stand, and to be able to say to keep his word. Okay, that was 10 years ago. Actually, it's 12 years ago now. So in 2022, there were 20 people that stood up in opposition to the speaker. That's the butterfly effect. Imagine if we stay involved and we keep things going in the direction that we are. Imagine another 10 years from now. We're eating the elephant one bite at a time. It's not fun. We'd like to have immediate results, but we didn't get here in overnight. We're not going to fix it overnight. Yes, Peggy?
I'd like to say one last thing. Glenn Beck made an You know, I'm 75 years old. I don't know how much longer I'm going to last. But he said to people my age, the people that have been doing this for a while, take heart, because he said, you are not the generation that will make the change, but you are raising the generation who will make the change. It won't be me. It won't be my children, because they're already close to 50, but it will be my grandchildren. We are laying the seeds. We are planting the seeds now to tell them what is right and what is wrong and how things should be. They will be the generation of change.
So keep doing what you're doing. Does anybody have anything else they would like to say, Jim?
Pardon me if I don't stand up.
That's fine.
I recently read a quote by the guy that wrote Amazing Grace, John Newton, that applies right now. It inspired me. I hope it inspires you all.
Are you gonna sing it?
No.
Just a quote.
He said, he was speaking of Christianity, of course, and he said, our cause is great, our time is short, the consequences of our labor are infinite. And I think that applies to the battles that we and our people to come behind us are going to have to be fighting for a long time, but it's worth it.
Amen. Well, there was a lot of bloodshed to create this country. We were given our freedom. We were born with freedom. We've taken it for granted. And so now we're having to play catch up. It's like I told my kids, you pay for everything. You can pay it on the front end or you can pay it on the back end. But either way, that debt gets paid, and we're having to pay it on the back end because we did. We went to sleep. We assumed that everything was going to be okay and that we didn't have to fight for what we want to keep and to keep us on the straight path. But thank you so much for all that you guys have done. Thank you for coming tonight, for sharing this. It was my birthday yesterday, so the cake is in celebration of both. So this is for if you want to get the recording notification service, make sure that you guys use the QR code to do that. Michael, thank you so much for coming in. We appreciate it. You know, I think it's important that we learn what each of these jobs do. I mean, we elect these guys to do stuff for us. And it's good to know what they do. And I can tell you that since Michael's taken office, he has really brought the technology to the office. You know, when you look at John Wright's website, you can go in and see, you know, your property. You can see all kinds of different things. They're really doing a good job in Tulsa County, and they deserve kudos for what you're doing. So thank you. Y'all have a good evening. Happy Easter.